Basil makes itself known in the garden, greeting you with a fresh aroma few other plants can rival. And wise growers like Will Lorentzen and Adrian know how to use basil to its full potential at the farmer's market.
Well, it's kind of a dirty trick. When people are walking past at farmer's market, I'll kind of crunch up a little basil leaf and you can watch them kind of like turn and follow their nose towards it. And it's very familiar to a lot of people. You know, it smells like their grandmother's kitchen or the first step into their garden. Got kind of a almost cinnamon flavor.
Yeah.
It's mainly an Italian style basil.
It's generally the same flavor.
Adrian and Will own and operate Jupiter Ridge Farm outside of Garber in northeast Iowa. Aside from basil, these passionate farmers grow a wide array of mushrooms and vegetables.
But this is like a through and through purple basil.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't picture myself really doing anything else. Just growing food sustainably that's wholesome and healthy for the community is, no matter how hard it gets, it always feels fulfilling, and it always feels like, oh, I'm doing something amazing, as difficult as it gets.
And we've got a couple more varieties in this house over here.
When it comes to planting basil, it's all about waiting for the right temperature. Much like tomatoes, basil is cold intolerant. One ill-timed frost and your crop is gone.
It's all gnarly looking.
Basil can kind of be divided up into strong greenhouse producers and then more of a field basil. Iowa does have some really hot, dry summers, and it does just fine. You can kind of see here versus here, the much smaller leaves.
It requires a little bit of maintenance, but definitely not as involved as tomatoes, trellising and pruning and all that stuff, but just a little bit of maintenance. There we go.
But you want to let it grow big enough that it starts to have some vigor when you do start to harvest it. So I would say generally about a month after transplant, you start getting a few small sprigs, and you want to let it grow. Take minimally until it gets really bushy, and that's when you can start really liberally harvesting it. The basil is kind of like the hydra. Every time you cut off one head of it, it sends out two more, and that can end up having some really crowded areas and dense foliar structure in the plant. It can just create problems if it's too dense. When you're pruning and harvesting basil, wherever you have one of these growth tips, here it's gonna shoot off into two new leads, and it's gonna get thicker and bushier. So when you're harvesting and pruning, what you wanna do is make sure that you're cutting out the middle of the plant. So when you're done, getting your bunch, you see how that's all open in the middle there now? That gives it a lot more airflow. That also gives it more room to grow.
And then another thing you want to do is the basil will try to flower. And it doesn't take too much work or maintenance, but as it's flowering, you want to go through and remove flowers regularly, because then that'll keep the basil in its foliar state. It'll grow bigger, tastier leaves, and it'll be more in line with the kind of culinary herb you want to use.
Basil is the perfect garden plant. It's incredibly easy to grow, it's prolific, and it tastes great in a variety of dishes. The next time you're planting your garden or raised bed or even a windowsill pot, consider basil. It will not disappoint.